European leaders will join Ukrainian President Zelenskyy for a meeting with President Trump at the White House today in a push to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war. For a look at what is at stake, let's bring in Victoria Coates, who served as Deputy National Security Advisor in the first Trump administration. She is now Vice President of the Heritage Foundation's Davis Institute for National Security in Foreign Policy. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Joe.
Do you know better than we do whether they were able to get a concession from Putin where some type of NATO-light security agreement between the United States and Ukraine, is that palatable? Do you know if that's palatable to Putin? And how is it different than NATO?
Well, I think what's different from NATO is there isn't a formal Article 5 commitment from the United States to take military action in the event that Ukraine is invaded. But at the same time, this would be a much stronger agreement than the 1992 Bucharest Memorandum, which obviously failed to provide security for Ukraine. So what I've discussed with Mark Rutte, who's the Secretary General of NATO, who's going to be in the Oval Office with President Zelenskyy here today, along with President Trump, is a kind of security barrier on the eastern front of NATO, the eastern border of Ukraine, that would be mutually enforced so that Russia doesn't have an easy way to re-invade either Ukraine or to take a bite out of any NATO ally of the United States. So I think border security, interestingly, a major topic here at home in the United States, also a topic in Europe. I think that's where the security guarantee is going to focus.
What do you think really prompted the original invasion by Putin? Because in doing a little bit of research for this, I can find articles that say to blame Putin is misguided. I mean, it's staggering for me to even read that. But saying that the West almost induced him to take that action because of the eastward sort of creep of NATO. Is there really anything to that? It seems, I mean, we know he wants to reconstitute the Soviet Union. They still wear CCCP sweatshirts. I mean, we know Mother Russia and all the nationalism. Was he induced to do this? Is this the West's fault?
Yes, well, Foreign Minister Lavrov can wear whatever T-shirt he wants. I think the blame here goes on Putin for invading Ukraine. Where I would place some blame on the West, Joe, is in terms of energy policy. This is an energy war. That's what Senator Manchin called it 3.5 years ago. And the way the West induced it was not by the westward creep, or eastward creep, rather, of NATO, which is a defensive alliance. It's never declared war on anyone, but rather through the determination of Europe, led by Germany, to buy Russian gas. They wanted the Nord Stream 2 pipeline to be in place. They wanted that gas to flow into Europe. And President Biden actually lobbied the Congress against the sanctions that were placed under President Trump in his first term. They were going to remain in place thanks to the efforts of my old boss, Senator Ted Cruz, to sanction Nord Stream 2 so that that gas didn't flow into Europe. Instead, Europe was going to import gas from the United States. No, the policy then under the Biden administration was to permit Nord Stream 2. So Putin thought that Europe needed to buy his gas, and so they were going to permit him to go into Ukraine, which he just wants. So that's the permissive element here. I think once you cut off that gas, and I think that's why it's so important in the recent EU deal that the president inked, that there's $750 billion in that deal to buy United States natural gas. You know, that's how you cut off Putin and deter him from taking this kind of aggression.
So there are economic carrots and sticks that's the only way this is going to work, isn't it? Will it be successful with economic, whether it's inducements or sanctions?
Well, it certainly can be. And if you look at the united economic might of what's going to be assembled in the Oval Office today, the UK Prime Minister, the head of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, the President of Italy, and the President of Finland. So those economies in unity with the United States dwarf not only Russia. I mean, they Russia's puny by comparison, but they also dwarf China. So as we look at the phone calls that are being made today, apparently President Putin called Prime Minister Modi of India, another very powerful economy, last night to explain what was happening. But I think the phone calls to Beijing are also going to be very interesting because China's the single largest importer of Russian energy. If they're facing additional tariffs or secondary sanctions over those imports, they may be the ones who start to put pressure on Putin to wind this up.
Do you expect the European contingent that you see there to be pressuring President Trump in terms of giving more to Zelenskyy, or do you think they're going to be pressuring Zelenskyy and Ukraine to give more to President Trump? I hate to put him in and say and Vladimir Putin, but is that which way we're headed? Is the president appeasing Russia too much in Europe's eyes?
Well, I mean, quite frankly, I don't care what the Europeans think in this case. They've had 3.5 years. This is a war in Europe, Joe, and they've had 3.5 years to try to get to some sort of resolution. They haven't had a meeting like this before. They haven't done anything to actually engage with Putin, figure out a way to end the killing, end this kind of conflict. And so I think they're there to be told what their marching orders are. They really don't have a lot of moral authority here. And I think, the president is dealing with a horrible situation that he inherited. As Putin himself said on Friday, this war would not have happened if President Trump had been in the Oval Office in 2022. And so I think this is more President Trump telling the Europeans what is in store here, what their path forward is because of how they've mismanaged the situation over the last 3.5 years.
That shot we're seeing right there, a lot of individuals just around the world, I guess, bristled with that, depending on I guess, on where you stand on a lot of things. Should he have been welcomed back onto U.S. soil without any concessions? And he's a wanted war criminal in a lot of different countries. I guess Netanyahu is too. But in Europe, there's a very dim view of Vladimir Putin, and I think they would have resisted certain parts of Europe, or certain parties in Europe would have resisted any type of negotiations or anything because of the atrocities that we've seen, and because Putin started it.
Oh, yes, and I have a very dim view of Vladimir Putin as well. I mean, I don't think he's particularly popular, including with President Trump or the First Lady. But in this case, I thought the choice of Alaska was actually brilliant, because bear in mind, Joe, the Russians had to sell Alaska to the United States because of their Crimean war debts in the 19th century. And because of that, they missed out on the gold rush, on the discovery of oil. And then finally, most importantly for us, for Alaska, that's where we fire off all of our polar orbit satellites, an extremely strategic location. Also the location, as I just said, of all of our natural resources that make us a competitor with Russia in energy markets. And so I thought that was a great choice. I thought it was an interesting optic to force Putin to walk down the steps and cross that big tarmac to get to President Trump, who, of course, physically towers over Putin, who's pretty short. So no, I didn't think that was in any way a concession to Putin. And also, President Trump didn't give any other concessions for the meeting. That's how he sets these things up. He's not going to give any concessions. He's not going to take any concessions. He's just going to take the meeting, find out what's possible to see if we can bring this war to a conclusion.
I think that's the biggest question. Is this possible? Do you think Putin will ever give without by giving something that we could and Ukraine could say, okay, this is a deal that works?
Good morning, Becky. Yes, no, I think this is going to have to be a negotiation. There is going to have to be some kind of accommodation of Russia to bring this to a conclusion, but it doesn't have to be handing Ukraine on a silver platter to Vladimir Putin. And I think The president has made that very clear. I think his engagement on the issue of security guarantees, so whatever we design on the eastern border of Ukraine is secure, that we don't go back in. But then finally, that he is deterring Putin from going into a NATO ally. That is the basic national security interest of the United States here. And how you do that is what he did in The Hague in April, getting our major European NATO allies and Canada to 5% of GDP on defense. That, again, with the unity that we're going to see in the Oval Office today, makes NATO almost untouchable for Putin, given the overall strength of the alliance. If the Europeans and the Canadians are investing in their security at that level, then there's really not much that Putin can do to go into NATO. And so that's the kind of work that the president's doing to deter Putin from future aggression.